Hi everybody, Dr. Carolyn Ross here again. I hope you're still with me. I know we've been talking about some pretty heavy stuff. Today we're going to be talking about intergenerational trauma and how it shows up in the workplace. Wherever you go, you take your trauma with you. That's one of my favorite sayings, and it's true. And this includes the workplace. This means that maladaptive behaviors that come from intergenerational trauma can show up at work. In the workplace, the effects of intergenerational trauma can be positive, or they can show up with some maladaptive behaviors, which could cause you problems. Some of the positive effects include that you may be more resilient and more able to persist despite challenges or setbacks, and that's a good thing in the workplace. Or you may have a great work ethic, be more empathetic and compassionate, and be more able to foster inclusivity in the workplace. Now, some of the ways intergenerational trauma effects can have a negative impact on the workplace include hypervigilance, which is being on red alert. It may cause anxiety, which then makes it harder to be focused and to deal with stress. Research on offspring of Holocaust survivors have shown that individuals who have a history of intergenerational trauma may have trouble trusting their colleagues, which can make teamwork difficult. An employee or leader who has the need to control or micromanage their direct reports may also be someone with a history of intergenerational trauma. Now, while some leaders may be decisive and confident, others may be demanding and rigid, causing problems. There are so many sources of intergenerational trauma that we've already discussed in previous videos. We know that it can occur from childhood abuse or trauma, but also from adult traumas. Other sources of trauma include natural disasters, war, immigration stress, and racism. So, what are the symptoms of intergenerational trauma that shows up at work? First of all, individuals exposed to intergenerational trauma may show signs of low self-esteem, anxiety, or depression, being easily upset over little things, having difficulty making decisions, managing money, or managing their time. The ones who are always late to everything. Difficulty trusting others, missing work, post-traumatic stress disorder, and all the symptoms associated with that, including things like having a lot of negative thoughts, being easily startled, always being on red alert, engaging in maladaptive coping mechanisms such as the use of drugs or alcohol, having trouble sleeping, difficulty with focus and concentration, and trouble with anger or rage. Honestly, we see that a lot in the medical profession, with doctors throwing things at their nurses or being very rageful in the office. Another one is experiencing overwhelming guilt or shame. So individuals who have multiple social identities along with intergenerational trauma may find it even harder to heal their intergenerational trauma. Racism and discrimination based on race, ethnic origin, or religion may exacerbate the signs and symptoms of intergenerational trauma, but can also fuel empathy if accepted and if the associated trauma can be healed. So we have to balance these two things out. Trauma is not something that any of us want to experience. However, there are many things that can come of that if the trauma is healed. So how do we heal the effects of intergenerational trauma? Well, the first thing is to identify your personal narrative and how it is impacting you today. Now, what does that mean? Well, in some families, the personal narrative is nothing ever works out for us. Everything is always on the down. So if that's the case, you can change that narrative. Number two, inviting an expert in intergenerational trauma to speak with your team can offer strategies and guidance to optimize the healing process. Someone like me. Number 3, building and learning resilience will help employees and leaders thrive. Developing strategies to enhance resilience success will contribute to your overall success. Number 4 is really, really important. Self-care. It's the key to healing. While a leader cannot erase ancestral trauma for employees, they can encourage self-care measures to heal from the effects of intergenerational trauma, and they can guide employees into breaking the cycle. Creating opportunities to infuse peace in the workplace environment allows employees to focus on self-care for the mind, body, and soul, which is critical for the recovery process. In the workplace, create support for employees to change their narrative, and that may come in the form of a mental health keynote speaker who will offer insights about how family trauma affects the workplace and help employees feel empowered to break the cycle and live their best lives, as Oprah always says. Every individual has the power to transcend ancestral trauma and improve the narrative of their life. And leaders who offer employees the support, resources, and guidance necessary to recognize the roots of trauma will aid them in disrupting its power. So I want to take you through an exercise in resilience. So when we talk about resilience, we have to understand that changing your thoughts can help you change your emotions. For example, if you think, I'm a bad parent, well, that will evoke lots of negative feelings and doesn't go anywhere either. In this exercise, you can work on changing your automatic, reflexive, negative thinking to what we call coping thoughts that are more helpful. In comparison to these automatic negative thoughts, coping thoughts are personalized, strength-based declarations about resiliency, history, or perspective that shift your attention to help effectively navigate difficult emotions. So examples of coping thoughts are saying to yourself, this situation won't last forever. This feeling will pass. I can feel anxious without reacting. I can tolerate this emotion until it becomes less intense. I can ride this emotion like a wave. This emotion feels uncomfortable, but it won't kill me. I've dealt with similar situations before. I am not my emotions, and this too shall pass. Now think of one that, in your own words, means something to you. But first, let's think of a difficult situation where a negative thought is paired with emotion. So something that happened that you still have a lot of emotions around. Write down that situation, describe it in detail, and then write down all the automatic thoughts that you had. Now, take a moment and think of a coping thought that is about your resiliency, like I am learning and changing, or one of the ones I just mentioned. Your statement has to be something you can believe on, no pie in the sky things. Because it's easy to forget these coping thoughts in the heat of an emotional moment. Write it down, put it on a sticky at your desk, or keep it in your purse so you can pull it out when needed. So that's one way to start dealing with these issues. And I just want to also share a resilience meditation with you. As I always recommend, sit in a place where you won't be disturbed. Take some deep breaths. Make sure your feet are flat on the floor. Close your eyes if you're comfortable, and if not, just stare at a point across the room. Now think of the situation that you want to resolve, something that has happened recently, or it could be an old situation that still has a lot of emotional content. Now allow that situation, pictures of it, thoughts about it, emotions related to it, to arise in your mind as if you're experiencing it now. Put yourself back in the place where that happened. Notice who is around you. Notice the surroundings. Were you in office? Were you at home? Etc. And just look around and see what you can see and hear. Now tune in to how you're feeling in this moment. Notice whether any uncomfortable emotions have shown up in response to imagining this triggering situation. See if you can notice and allow the emotions to be there without reacting to it. In other words, see if you can be curious about it, if you can welcome the emotion in rather than pushing it away. Whatever the feeling is in your body, allow yourself to sit with it. Be curious about the feeling rather than resist it. Lean into it rather than away from it. Now, as you sit with the feeling, let's think about the automatic negative thought that shows up for you in this situation. It may be the same negative thought that you used in the situation in the exercise. Notice what happens to the feeling in your body when you have that automatic negative thought. Notice whether it changes at all, perhaps becoming stronger or more intense. Now let us bring your coping thought to mind to replace this unhelpful negative thought. Use the coping thought that you developed in the resilience exercise. Allow yourself to repeat this coping thought to yourself several times over the next little bit. As you do this, notice what happens to the feeling in your body. Notice whether anything changes. Okay, take a deep breath in through your nose and out through your mouth. And as you do, slowly open your eyes and come back to the room where you're sitting. Just reflect on what it was like to sit with the feeling of distress. Ask yourself, what was the effect of the automatic negative thought on the feeling? Compare that to what was the effect of the coping thought on the feeling. I would strongly encourage you to journal about your experience, to write down your automatic negative thoughts, and to write a countering coping thought next to it. In this way, you can practice this skill of resilience in the face of any workplace situations that trigger your trauma, essentially. I hope that was helpful. This is Dr. Carolyn. I'll see you next week.